All right, let's get right into it. I want you to picture China back in the early 1960s. The Great Leap Forward had been a complete, catastrophic failure. And because of that, Chairman Mao Zedong had sort of taken a back seat from running things day to day. But make no mistake, he was not retiring. Oh no, he was watching, he was waiting, and he was plotting one of the most dramatic, earth-shaking comebacks in modern history.
You see, Mao had this core belief that a true revolution can never, ever stand still. By 1966, he felt like that revolutionary fire in China was starting to go out. So, he lit a new one. He called it the Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution. And what was the goal? To wipe China clean of what he called the four olds. We're talking to old ideas, old culture, old customs, and old habits. It was basically a call to arms for the nation's youth to just completely erase the past.
So what was the fuel for this massive fire? It was this little thing, the quotations from Chairman Mao, which the world came to know as the Little Red Book. It was just a collection of his thoughts. But over the next decade, and you have to wrap your head around this number, more than 1 billion copies were printed. That's a number second only to the Bible. This wasn't just a book, it became a holy text, and it created one of the most intense personality cults you can possibly imagine. So here's how we're going to break down this incredibly turbulent time. We'll start with the spark that lit the whole thing off. Then we'll walk through the decade of pure chaos that followed. After that, we'll look at the power vacuum it created. And finally, we'll explore the scars it left behind and how it shaped the China we know today.
Okay, so if you're a leader who's been sidelined, how do you get back on top? Well, Mao's strategy was both brilliant and, frankly, terrifying. He just went around the whole party system, the very people who were starting to doubt him, and he made a direct appeal to the most passionate, the most idealistic people in the country, the youth. He called on them to be the enforcers of his brand new revolution.
And wow, did they answer his call? I mean, the enthusiasm was explosive. Students started organizing themselves into these paramilitary groups they called the Red Guards. Just imagine, millions of them traveling to Beijing, packing into Tiananmen Square for these huge rallies, all waving their little red books in the air while Mao looked down on them. This wasn't just a political rally, it was like the birth of a new army, and they were loyal to one person and one person only, him.
And that brings us to the next phase, a full decade of chaos. With Mao's personal blessing, the Red Guards took all that revolutionary energy and turned it into action. And who were their first targets? Symbols of the old system, like their own teachers and professors. What started out as ideological debates quickly spiraled into public humiliation, brutal beatings, and just unimaginable violence.
Now, what's so wild about this slide is just how broad these targets were. We're not just talking about political enemies here. The four olds covered pretty much every part of traditional Chinese life. Ancient books, priceless art, religious temples, even things like old family traditions, all of it was labeled bourgeois and targeted for complete destruction. It was a terrifying attempt to create a cultural year zero.
And you have to understand, this violence wasn't just happening on its own. It was being actively encouraged from the very top. This quote, and it is chilling, comes from Mao's wife, Jiang Qing, who was a key leader of the whole thing. It's essentially a blank check for anarchy. She's telling the Red Guards that any violence they commit for the revolution isn't just okay, it's glorious. The struggle session became the horrifying symbol of this whole era. Victims would be dragged in front of huge crowds, forced into painful positions for hours, and then subjected to non-stop public insults, torture, and beatings. And you know what the cruelest part was? Often, their own friends, their own students, even their own family members were forced to participate. It completely shattered the basic fabric of trust in society. If you want to get a sense of the scale of this horror, just look at these numbers from a single year. After Mao called for an all-out civil war in late '66, things escalated fast. In 1967 alone, official estimates say 250,000 people were killed, and 3 times that many were left permanently disabled. And folks, this was just the beginning. And this really shows you that absolutely no one was safe. The chaos went all the way to the top of the Communist Party. Take Liu Shaoqi, the head of state. He was branded a traitor, publicly beaten, and then just left to die alone in a prison cell. Or Deng Xiaoping, another high-ranking official. He was purged and sent to work in a tractor factory. During that time, his own son was tortured by Red Guards and thrown from a window, which left him paralyzed for life.
But, a movement built on that much chaos just can't last forever. As we get into the early 1970s, the power dynamics inside China are about to get completely scrambled by a series of shocking events, and it's going to create this huge power vacuum at the very top. And it starts with this bombshell. In 1971, Lin Biao, the powerful defense minister and Mao's own hand-picked successor, dies in a mysterious plane crash over Mongolia. The official story was that he was trying to flee to the Soviet Union after a failed coup. His death threw the whole question of succession into chaos and did serious damage to the credibility of Mao's regime.
With Lin Biao out of the picture, the more moderate Premier Zhu Enlai's influence started to grow, and he jumped at the chance to pull China out of the isolation it had put itself in. This led to a really stunning series of diplomatic wins. China finally got its long-overdue seat at the UN, we saw the famous Ping-Pong diplomacy with the US, and it all led up to President Richard Nixon's historic visit to Beijing in 1972.
Then we hit 1976, the year that changed absolutely everything. In January, the widely respected Premier Zhou Enlai dies. Just 8 months later, in September, Mao Zedong himself is dead. The entire nation was in shock. And then, only a month after that, Mao's widow Jiang Qing and her 3 radical allies, the so-called Gang of Four, are arrested. Just like that, the Cultural Revolution was officially over. In less than a year, the entire power structure that Mao had built just collapsed.
So in the aftermath, what's left of China is a nation that is traumatized and completely broken. But out of all that wreckage, a new leader is about to emerge. A man who had been kicked out of power not once, but twice, and who was about to set China on a totally different course.
I think this quote from an old party veteran just perfectly sums up the tragic, complicated legacy of Mao. I mean, he was the guy who founded the People's Republic, a giant of history. But the disasters of his later years, with the Cultural Revolution as the horrifying finale, left this stain that makes it impossible to just give a simple verdict on his role.
So here's the key question. How did the party move on from this? Well, they put the Gang of Four on trial. These 4 people became the public scapegoats for an entire decade of chaos. By blaming them for the worst excesses, the new leadership could condemn the mayhem, while at the same time keeping the official image of Chairman Mao as the great founder of the nation mostly intact. And the country that these new leaders inherited was on the brink of total collapse. The economy was a mess. The average peasant was making about $40 a year. A whole generation of people had lost their chance at an education because universities were closed for 10 years. And society itself was just deeply, deeply scarred by years of people being forced to turn on each other. And who steps in to try and fix all of this? None other than Deng Xiaoping. Yep, the same guy who was purged and sent to work in that tractor factory. He gets rehabilitated for a second time, and he sees that China is in a catastrophic state. He knows it needs a radical, complete change of direction, away from all the ideological purity and toward just practical results.
And his solution was called the 4 Modernizations. It focused on agriculture, industry, science, and defense. Now, this was a revolutionary idea in its own way. It basically meant having the courage to throw out the strict Maoist playbook and instead use policies that actually worked, opening up China to the world and unleashing the economic power that would completely transform the country forever.
And all of this leaves us with one last, really crucial question. The Cultural Revolution was a decade of deep, deep national trauma. It tore families apart, it destroyed a priceless cultural heritage, and it cost millions of lives. So when we look at the China of today, this global superpower that's defined by incredible economic growth, but also by tight social control, we have to ask ourselves, how much of its current identity was forged in the fires of that lost decade?